All right, today we're jumping into one of the weirder but absolutely pivotal chapters in the whole Hebrew Bible, Joshua chapter 5. And we're going to look at it through the eyes of biblical scholar Dr. David Howard, who helps us make sense of the wild preparations that went down right before, one of the most famous battles in history. So I want you to just picture this scene for a second. The people of Israel have just crossed the Jordan River, a huge miracle, and now they're camped literally at the doorstep of Jericho. This is their first big military test in the new land. I mean, the tension must have been off the charts. And what do they do next? They stop. They stop everything to do a series of rituals that, from any military playbook, look completely, utterly insane. Why on earth would they do that? That's the big question we're diving into. Well, this is where Dr. David Howard comes in. He argues this wasn't just some random timeout. No way. He says this entire chapter is one unified and totally essential story of preparation. It's all about one thing: getting right with God before the first sword is even drawn. And here's the core idea, the main takeaway from his work. This chapter is showing us that Israel's victory wasn't going to come from having the bigger army or the smarter strategy. Nope. It was all about their spiritual condition. They were sanctifying themselves, making themselves holy, because their success was completely tied to their relationship with God. Okay, so the first preparation, it's a real shocker. Right when they're staring down their enemy, the entire army of fighting men undergoes a mass circumcision. Now, let's be real, this wasn't just a simple ritual. This was a physically painful act that would have made them incredibly vulnerable. And it was all to correct a major failure that had been going on for 40 years. And the text doesn't shy away from it either. The name of the place is, pretty graphic. It translates to the Hill of Foreskins. It really drives home the reality of what happened. So why was this so critical right now? Well, because a whole generation of men had been born during those 40 years in the desert. And during that entire time, this fundamental sign of their covenant with God had just been ignored. And this is where the story gets even more interesting. You might think, okay, so this is just about getting the new generation up to speed. But according to Dr. Howard's analysis, it goes much deeper. This is about fixing a problem that started way, way at the top, with Moses himself. So remember that really strange story back in the book of Exodus? God has just called Moses to go free the Israelites from Egypt. And then, out of nowhere, the text says God tries to kill him. It's so weird. And why? Because Moses, the guy who's about to deliver God's law, hadn't even followed it in his own family. He hadn't circumcised his own son. It's his wife, Zipporah, who thinks fast, performs the ritual with a sharp stone, and literally saves his life. So you see this stark contrast being set up. Moses has this incredibly intense near-death experience over this very issue, but for whatever reason, it doesn't lead to national action for the next 40 years. Now enter Joshua. He's the new leader, and what's one of the first things he does? He fixes it. Before anyone even thinks about fighting, he makes sure the whole nation is right with the covenant. He's finally, doing things by the book. All right, so that's the first major preparation. Let's move on to the second one, which happens right after the men have healed. The people celebrate the Passover, but this isn't just any Passover. It's the first one they've ever celebrated in the Promised Land. And this is a huge, huge symbolic moment for them. Think about it. For 40 years, every single morning, they've relied on manna, this miraculous bread from heaven. It was their lifeline. But the day after this Passover, the very first day they eat the produce of the land of Canaan, the manna stops, just like that, forever. It's this powerful symbol that their time as wanderers is over. They're no longer just depending on a daily handout, they are now inheritors of a promise. And we're not just talking about an empty plot of land here. The promise, which was spelled out for them back in Deuteronomy, was for a fully developed country. We're talking cities they didn't build, houses full of stuff they didn't fill, wells they didn't dig, vineyards they didn't plant. They were about to inherit an entire ready-made infrastructure. Dr. Howard has this really striking modern analogy to help us get our heads around this. He says it's kind of like a neutron bomb strategy. That theoretical weapon that gets rid of the people but leaves the buildings and infrastructure perfectly intact. That was basically the plan. It's fascinating. The entire book of Joshua only mentions 3 cities that were totally burned down. The rest, they were to be captured and moved into. They weren't just conquering a land, they were inheriting a civilization. Okay, this leads us to the third and final piece of the puzzle in this chapter. And honestly, this might be the most important one of all. Joshua's out, probably scouting the defenses of Jericho, and all of a sudden, he's face to face with a man holding a drawn sword. Now, Joshua is a general, right? So he asks the most logical military question you could possibly ask. Are you for us or are you for our enemies? He's sizing this guy up, thinking in terms of friend or foe, us versus them. It's a totally practical, boots on the ground kind of question. And the answer he gets back is just one word. But it's a word that completely demolishes Joshua's entire way of thinking. The man just says, no. Not I'm on your side, not I'm on their side, just no. I mean, what a stunning answer. It forces a total perspective shift. And then the man reveals who he is. I am the commander of the army of the Lord. See, the point wasn't to pick a side in Joshua's little conflict. The point was to declare his own identity and authority. This wasn't just some powerful new ally showing up to help out. This moment reframes the entire situation. The real question was never, is God on our side? The right question was, are we on God's side? The battle for Jericho wasn't Israel's battle to win with a little help from above. No, this was the Lord's battle, and Israel's job was simply to get in line and follow orders. So when you step back and look at these three things together, the circumcision, the Passover, and this encounter, you see exactly what Dr. Howard was talking about. It's not random. It's one powerful, unified message. This whole chapter is about getting into proper alignment before the battle even starts. Think about it. First, they renewed their covenant with God on a personal, physical level. Second, they celebrated their new identity as inheritors, leaving their wandering past behind. And finally, they submitted to the ultimate commander, realizing that this was God's campaign all along, not theirs. So at the end of the day, what does this chapter really show us? It shows that for ancient Israel, the number one condition for victory wasn't a bigger army or a brilliant general or better weapons. It was spiritual readiness. It was a perfect illustration of seek first the kingdom, and all these other things, like, say, the city of Jericho, will be given to you. And that really leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, one that goes way beyond this ancient story, right? In our own lives, our careers, whatever challenges we're facing, what if the most important work isn't the fight itself, but the preparation? What if the real battle is always won or lost in those quiet moments of getting aligned, long before the first shot is ever fired?